Alana was a warrior in the truest sense of the word. Life had tried to claim her 3 times, and 3 times she had looked the end in the face and refused to blink. She was a 3-time cancer survivor, a feat that felt like a miracle to everyone who knew her. When her doctors finally declared her completely healthy and free of the need for chemotherapy, the world seemed to brighten. To commemorate her victory and the 3 lives she felt she had been given, Alana decided to get a tattoo. 3 distinct marks on her hand, symbolizing her resilience. But life is often cruel in its timing. Just as happiness began to settle into her bones, a shadow fell over her doorstep. He wasn't just a thief. He was a methodical, disturbed predator with a twisted obsession. He targeted young, independent women who wore tattoos. To him, the ink was a brand of defiance he couldn't stomach. The end for Alana was not peaceful. The intruder ended her life in a display of calculated cruelty, eventually reducing her remains to ash. In a final, macabre act of disrespect, he treated her remains like a mere plaything in a game of malice. Alana's mother, Martha, was shattered. Her only child, who had fought so hard to live, had been taken by a monster. Desperate to keep her daughter close, she turned to an ancient but resurging practice, the memorial tattoo. She took Alana's ashes to a local tattoo artist, requesting that the remains be mixed with ink and tattooed onto her own skin. She believed that through this bond, Alana's spirit would remain tethered to her, a permanent connection beyond the grave. Now, the story shifts to Skylar, a brilliant but reclusive game developer. Skylar lived a quiet life with her elderly caretaker, Mrs. Gable, who treated her like her own daughter. Skylar's world was digital. She spent her days designing mechanics and her nights obsessively playing retro arcade games, constantly chasing a new high score. However, Skylar carried a heavy burden of trauma. She suffered from a crippling fear of the dark, acluophobia, and could not bear to be without light for even a few seconds. This fear stemmed from a horrific incident on a past New Year's Eve. While out celebrating, she had been abducted by a stranger and held in a pitch-black room against her will. The trauma of that night drove Skylar into a shell of deep distress. She worked from home, hiding from the judgmental eyes of the world. On that same fateful New Year's Eve, before the incident, Skylar had visited a tattoo parlor to get a gaming console tattooed on her hand, a symbol of her passion. By a terrifying twist of fate, she had gone to the same artist as Alana's mother. In a moment of professional negligence, the artist used the same equipment and ink reservoir that contained Alana's ashes for Skylar's tattoo. Alana's essence was now flowing through Skylar's veins. Soon after getting the tattoo, Skylar's life took an even stranger turn. She began to hear voices, high-pitched, feminine cries that echoed in her mind. She felt a foreign energy pulsing under her skin, manifesting as sharp, stinging pains in her hand. It felt as if someone else was trying to break through from inside her. The pain became so unbearable that Skylar tried to physically remove the tattoo, but a strange force would stop her hand every time. Driven to the brink of madness, she returned to the tattoo artist. Under Skylar's frantic pressure, the artist confessed the truth. The ink, it was contaminated. It was mixed with the ashes of a girl named Alana. Horrified and angry, Skylar rushed to a clinic to have the tattoo laser removed. But as the machine hummed to life and approached her skin, an agonizing, supernatural pain flared through her entire body. It wasn't just physical, it was an emotional rejection. She realized she couldn't remove it. Later, while trying to find a moment of peace in a cafe, Skylar felt the walls closing in. The whispers and the ghosts of her past combined with the spiritual weight of the tattoo. In a moment of total despair, Skylar climbed to the roof of a building and took a leap of faith she hoped would end her pain. She survived the fall, but at a devastating cost. She was left paralyzed from the waist down, confined to a wheelchair, dependent entirely on Mrs. Gable. Word of the ash ink accident eventually reached Alana's mother, Martha. Intrigued and sorrowful, she tracked Skylar down. Seeing the broken girl in the wheelchair, Martha didn't offer pity, she offered strength. "My daughter was a fighter," Martha told Skylar. "She beat the odds 3 times. She didn't hide and she didn't give up. That tattoo isn't a curse, Skylar. It's her strength living in you. You are in a game now, and you have to stop being the victim. You have to play to win." As the mother spoke, something shifted in Skylar. The fear that had defined her for years began to harden into a cold, calculated resolve. For the first time since her trauma, Skylar smiled. The transition was abrupt. That very night, the atmosphere around Skylar's house curdled. The air grew thick and silent. The predator, having tracked the tattooed girl, was now outside. Mrs. Gable, sensing something wrong, went outside to investigate. When she didn't return, Skylar rolled her wheelchair to the window. In the pale moonlight, she saw a sight that froze her blood. The caretaker was unresponsive, slumped on a garden swing. Suddenly, the intruder appeared right against the window pane, a terrifying shadow in the night. Skylar screamed and reached for her phone to call for help, but the intruder was ahead of her. He cut the power. The darkness, her greatest fear, swallowed the house. In a panic, Skylar tried to maneuver her wheelchair, but she tumbled out, crashing to the floor. Looking at her hand, she gasped. The single gaming tattoo had transformed. There were now 3 distinct marks, glowing faintly. Before she could process this, the intruder emerged from the shadows. Without her mobility or her light, Skylar was defenseless. The intruder finished his grim task, and Skylar felt the cold sting of the end. But as her vision faded, one of the 3 tattoos on her hand vanished. Skylar's eyes snapped open. She was back in her wheelchair minutes before the intruder's arrival. The memorial tattoo had granted her what every gamer craves: extra lives. She knew the pattern now. She knew where the intruder would enter. She immediately called the authorities, providing specific details. She warned Mrs. Gable and pulled her into a reinforced safe room. However, the adversary was adaptable. He realized help was coming and escalated his actions. He overcame the responding security guard and, unable to break into the safe room, set the area on fire. Mrs. Gable managed to drag Skylar out of the burning room, but they ran straight into the intruder in the living room. Just as he lunged, the authorities arrived. Skylar managed to crawl toward the door, signaling the officers. They opened fire, taking the intruder down. As the police led Skylar toward their vehicle, she saw something impossible. Across the street, 3 identical figures stood in the shadows, all dressed like the intruder. They gestured toward her, a sign that this wasn't just one man, but a coordinated group. Before she could shout a warning, the vehicle she was being placed in was caught in a massive explosion. Skylar woke up for the 3rd time. She had 1 life left. Her fear of the dark was gone, replaced by the cold logic of a game designer. She understood the enemy AI. "We don't turn on the lights," Skylar whispered to Mrs. Gable. "The darkness is our territory now." Using her knowledge of the house and her skills as a developer, she set a trap. She and the caretaker moved in total silence. They prepared a perimeter near the entrance with flammable liquid. When the first intruder entered, confident in the shadows, Mrs. Gable doused him from above. Skylar, waiting below, struck a lighter. The adversary became a beacon of fire, stumbling out into the night. The second intruder breached the living room. Skylar and Mrs. Gable worked in perfect tandem, and they managed to incapacitate him using the very environment he thought he controlled. But the third intruder, the leader, was faster. He cornered them in the hallway. He pinned Skylar to the floor, his presence heavy and suffocating. He mocked her, pressing a blade against her throat. Skylar, however, had one more move. She reached out and shattered a nearby decorative mirror. With the jagged glass in her hand, she felt a surge of energy from the final tattoo. It wasn't her own strength. It was Alana's. The spirit of the girl who had beaten death 3 times surged through Skylar's arm. With a primal scream, Skylar drove the glass shard into the intruder's shoulder, disarming him just as the authorities finally filled the air with sirens. Skylar sat on the floor, her back against the wall, Mrs. Gable breathing heavily beside her. She looked down at her hand. The 3 tattoos were gone, leaving only the original gaming console mark. The debt was paid. Alana had given her 3 chances to live, and Skylar had finally won the game. She was no longer the girl afraid of the dark. She was the girl who had mastered it.